Leave this bank immediately or I will call security. The words sliced through the Friday afternoon air, as sharp and sudden as the sound that followed, the violent tear of paper echoing off the marble floors of Madison National Bank like a gunshot. The bank manager, Brigitte Hawthorne, held the two halves of a $5,000 check aloft, a grim trophy for the entire crowded lobby to see. Before her stood Zara and Zuri Johnson, 13-year-old twins. Their school uniforms were neat, their faces a canvas of shock and disbelief. "Your father's check is fraudulent," Brigitte announced, her voice resonating with practiced authority. The satisfaction in her tone was a palpable thing. She had caught them. These two young black girls who had dared to walk into her pristine suburban branch, thinking they could pull a fast one. Zara's hands moved in a blur, her phone already recording. The camera captured Brigitte's triumphant expression, the torn check, the curious, judgmental eyes of the other customers. Beside her, Zuri's fingers flew across her own screen, a silent storm of messages, her face a mask of calm that betrayed the humiliation burning in her chest. "Your daddy," Brigitte smirked, leaning in to savor the moment, "is going to jail for check fraud." 15 years she'd managed this branch. She knew trouble when she saw it. And two black girls with a check for $5,000? Please, she wasn't born yesterday. But just outside, a quiet arrival was about to change everything. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled to the curb, not just any SUV, but a custom Bentley Bentayga, a vehicle worth more than most of the houses in this neighborhood. The door swung open, and out stepped David Johnson, CEO of Johnson Technologies, immaculate in a $10,000 Tom Ford suit. He glanced at his phone, his eyes scanning Zuri's frantic texts, his screen already glowing with Zara's livestream, now with thousands of viewers. His jaw tightened. Someone had just made a very, very expensive mistake. What Brigitte Hawthorne could not possibly know, what she couldn't have conceived in her wildest, most prejudiced dreams, was that she had just torn up a check from a man whose company kept $50 million in her bank. She had just humiliated the daughters of one of the most powerful black CEOs in America. And Zara's recording? It was about to make Brigitte Hawthorne the most infamous woman on the internet. This is the story of how a single racist assumption can shatter a life. If you believe these stories need to be told, take a moment to subscribe and tell us what country you're listening from. We want to know how far this message travels. Now, let's rewind 3 hours and see how two honor students, trying to deposit funds for their science fair trip, found themselves at the center of a storm that would cost a national bank millions and expose a pattern of discrimination that had festered in the shadows for years. 13-year-old Zara and Zuri Johnson had no idea their lives were about to change. The twin sisters were the pride of Preston Academy, brilliant, honored students who had just led their robotics team to a stunning victory at the state championships. Their sights were now set on an even greater challenge, the international robotics competition in Japan. Their father, David Johnson, had given them the $5,000 check to cover their expenses. But David wasn't just any father. He was a man who had forged an empire from nothing, a survivor of the foster care system. Shuffled from one home to the next, he learned early that if no one was going to believe in him, he would have to believe in himself. Through sheer will, sleepless nights, and an unshakable vision, he built Johnson Technologies from a dream into a $500 million reality. Yet despite their father's immense success, Zara and Zuri were grounded. That Friday afternoon, dressed in simple hoodies and jeans, they grabbed their backpacks and took the city bus to the suburban branch of Madison National Bank. They were just two kids on a mission, hoping to represent their school on the world stage. Inside, from her corner office, Brigitte Hawthorne surveyed her domain. For 15 years, she had worn the title of branch manager like a crown. Her walls were a testament to her reign, plaques for fraud prevention, certificates for security excellence. Brigitte prided herself on one thing above all else, an almost supernatural ability to protect her bank, a sixth sense for trouble. And at precisely 2 o'clock, as Zara and Zuri walked through the glass doors, her sixth sense began to scream. The bank was humming with the energy of a Friday afternoon. Businessmen in suits, elderly couples, young professionals. The twins took their place at the end of a long line, patient and polite, scrolling through their phones. 20 minutes crawled by. They never complained. But from her glass-walled office, Brigitte's gaze was fixed. Two black teenagers in hoodies. In her branch. She didn't see honor students. She didn't see robotics champions. She saw what her prejudice showed her. Trouble. Without a second thought, she texted Jerome, the bank's security guard. "Watch the two in hoodies. Possible trouble." Jerome glanced at his phone, then at the two girls standing quietly in line. A knot tightened in his stomach. But Brigitte was the boss. Finally, Zara and Zuri reached the front. A new teller, Jennifer Chen, greeted them with a warm smile. The twins smiled back, relieved. They handed her their father's check. $5,000. Signed by David Johnson. Drawn on his account at this very bank. Jennifer began the transaction. Everything seemed perfectly routine. But before she could finish, a sharp voice cut in. "Stop right there." Brigitte Hawthorne stood beside her, eyes locked on the check. Jennifer looked up, startled. "I need to verify this," Brigitte announced, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. She examined the check with theatrical scrutiny. "Any check over $1,000 from a new customer requires my personal approval." Zara, always the more direct of the two, spoke up. "We're not new customers, ma'am. Our father opened our accounts here when we were born." A tight, cold smile touched Brigitte's lips. "I'll be the judge of that." Before this story goes any further, know that your support helps us tell the stories that matter. Please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Zuri stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "Our dad is David Johnson. He's had his accounts with Madison National for over a decade. This is a legitimate check for our school's robotics competition." But Brigitte had already convicted them in her mind. As she held that check, a single, powerful question hung unspoken in the air. Have you ever been made to feel like an intruder in a place you had every right to be? Let us know in the comments. What the twins didn't know was that this was only the beginning. And what Brigitte Hawthorne didn't know was that she had just lit the fuse on the biggest mistake of her career. Brigitte held the check to the light as if inspecting a counterfeit bill. Then she turned her gaze back to the twins. "I'm going to need to see identification." Zara and Zuri exchanged a look but complied, handing over their state IDs. Brigitte studied them with the intensity of a detective at a crime scene. After a long moment, her eyes narrowed. "These look suspicious." Zara stared. "Suspicious? They're state-issued. What's suspicious?" "I've seen plenty of fake IDs," Brigitte replied coolly. "I'll need additional verification." The twins could feel the weight of eyes turning toward them, but they held their ground. Zara opened her backpack and laid out her Preston Academy student ID, her library card, even her robotics team membership card. "Here," she said, her voice steady. "And if that's not enough," she added, pulling out her phone, "here are pictures of us with our dad. That's him, David Johnson. This was our birthday last month. This was at the robotics competition." Brigitte waved a dismissive hand. "Anyone can fake photos. I need to speak with the account holder directly." "Fine," Zuri said, her composure unwavering. "Call him. His number is on file." Brigitte retreated to her office. Through the glass, they watched her dial. They knew their father was in a board meeting, but surely his assistant would answer and clear this up. The minutes ticked by. The line grew longer. Murmurs rippled through the lobby. Finally, Brigitte emerged, her expression unchanged. "I spoke with someone claiming to be his assistant," she said. "They confirmed the check." A wave of relief washed over Zara. "So, we can complete the deposit?" "Not so fast," Brigitte snapped. "That could have been anyone. A friend of yours pretending. I need to speak to the real account holder." "But his assistant confirmed it," Zuri protested, a slight edge creeping into her voice. "The assistant isn't the account holder," Brigitte stated. "And frankly, I find it very hard to believe that someone like David Johnson, if he even exists, would have children who show up at a bank dressed like this." Her gesture toward their hoodies was filled with contempt. That's when the atmosphere in the bank shifted. Several customers had stopped their business entirely. An older gentleman in a suit quietly raised his phone. A young woman near the door did the same. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting. Zuri took a deep breath. "Ma'am, our father is David Johnson, CEO of Johnson Technologies. It's a major tech company. You can look it up. We are his daughters." The words hung in the air for a second before Brigitte let out a short, mocking laugh that echoed through the lobby. Right, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And I'm the Queen of England. You really expect me to believe a CEO's children take the city bus dressed in hoodies to cash a check? Do you think I'm a fool? She then turned, addressing the entire bank. Attention everyone, I apologize for the delay. We have two individuals attempting to process what I believe to be a fraudulent check. Please be patient. The words landed like a physical blow. Fraudulent. In front of everyone, she was calling them criminals. Zara felt heat rise in her face, not of shame, but of pure righteous anger. She remembered her father's words. Stay calm, stay dignified, and document everything. The teller, Jennifer Chen, who had watched this unfold in horror, finally spoke. Miss Hawthorne, I've pulled up the account. David Johnson has been a customer for 13 years. The history is clear, the funds are sufficient, everything checks out. She turned her monitor so Brigitte could see. Brigitte's face flushed with rage. Excuse me, she hissed, her voice dangerously low. Are you questioning my judgment, Jennifer? No, ma'am, I just think you're new, 3 weeks. I have been doing this for 15 years. I have won awards for this. When I say something is suspicious, it is suspicious. Are we clear? Jennifer swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. In fact, Brigitte continued, I'm writing you up for insubordination. You should have called me the moment you saw this check. As Jennifer stepped back, pale and defeated, another voice emerged from the line. Excuse me, but I recognize these young ladies. An elderly white woman with perfectly styled silver hair stepped forward. It was Mrs. Patterson, a longtime customer and a pillar of the community. I saw them in the newspaper just last week, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice firm. They won the state robotics championship. The article mentioned their father, David Johnson. These are good girls. I can vouch for them. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered in the twins' eyes, but Brigitte merely offered a patronizing smile. That's very kind, Mrs. Patterson, but I think you might be mistaken. I am not mistaken, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice sharp with indignation. I appreciate your input, Brigitte replied, her tone making it clear she didn't. But this is a security matter. Please step back. She pulled out her phone and motioned for Jerome, the security guard. I need you to detain these two. I'm calling the police to sort this out. The word police sent a chill through the lobby. More phones came out, now openly recording. Jerome approached, his face a mask of conflict. As a black man in his 40s, he knew exactly what this was. He looked at the two young girls and saw his own daughters. Miss Hawthorne, he began carefully, these kids haven't done anything. They're committing fraud, she snapped. And if you don't do your job, Jerome, you won't have one by the end of the day. Do you understand me? His jaw tightened. He had a family, a mortgage, but he also had a conscience. I understand, he said quietly, but he did not move toward the twins. Zara had seen enough. She raised her own phone, hit record, and aimed the lens at Brigitte. For the record, she said, her voice clear and strong, my name is Zara Johnson. This is my sister, Zuri. We are 13 years old. We came to this bank to deposit a legitimate check, and we are being racially profiled by the manager, Brigitte Hawthorne. Put that phone down right now, Brigitte's voice was shrill. You are creating a disturbance. Stop recording or I will have you arrested. Arrested for what? Zara challenged. Documenting discrimination? While Zara held her ground, Zuri's thumbs were a blur. She wasn't just recording, she was mobilizing. She sent a detailed message to her father's entire legal team and his executive assistant, outlining every accusation, every threat. And then, she sent one last text directly to her father. Dad, Madison National Bank, we need you now. It's an emergency. Brigitte saw the two phones, the defiant faces, and felt her control slipping away. She reached across the counter, snatched the check from Jennifer's station, and held it up one last time. This check, she declared to the silent watching lobby, is fraudulent, and I'm going to prove it. With a final decisive motion, she tore it in half. The sound of that tear was the sound of a career ending, the sound of a lawsuit beginning, the sound of a truth, ugly and undeniable, being exposed for the world to see. Ask yourself, if you were in that lobby, a witness to this injustice, would you speak up or would you stay silent? Drop your answer in the comments below, because the 60 seconds that followed were about to change everything. and it was all caught on camera. The events of the next few minutes would echo for years, replayed across social media, dissected in boardrooms, and studied in diversity seminars. But in that moment, within the hushed marble walls of the bank, time itself seemed to stretch thin. Brigitte Hawthorne raised the check high above her head, a strange glint in her eye. "This ends now," she declared, her voice sharp. Then, with a swift, violent motion, she tore the check in half. The rip of paper sliced through the stunned silence like a gunshot. A collective gasp rose from the customers and staff. Beside them, Jerome, the security guard, stood frozen. Jennifer Chen's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mrs. Patterson whispered an audible, "Oh my God." But Zara's phone never wavered. Her hands were steady, her camera focused, capturing every detail. She zoomed in on Brigitte's face, the smug satisfaction, the absolute certainty that she had done the right thing. The bank manager held the two halves of the destroyed check like trophies, a victor in a battle no one else was fighting. "There," Brigitte announced to the entire room, her voice ringing with authority. "No more fraud, no more games." What Brigitte failed to comprehend, what her narrow worldview made it impossible for her to see, was that she had just committed a crime. That check was not hers to destroy. The moment it was presented for deposit, it became bank property, a legal financial instrument, and she had just torn it to shreds in front of dozens of witnesses. But legal ramifications were the furthest thing from Brigitte's mind. Intoxicated by her own righteousness, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was crisp and professional as she made her report. "Yes, this is Brigitte Hawthorne, manager of Madison National Bank on Riverside Drive. I need police assistance immediately. We have 2 black teenagers attempting to commit check fraud. They're becoming belligerent." 2 black teenagers. She made sure to specify their race, as if that single detail was the entirety of the crime itself. Zara kept recording, her live stream now exploding across platforms, shared and reshared by the second. Zuri's thumbs flew across her screen, her messages growing more urgent, but none of them, not Brigitte, not the twins, knew what was happening 30 floors above the city. In a glass-walled boardroom, David Johnson stood at the head of a massive conference table, presenting quarterly projections to his board of directors. Suddenly, his executive assistant, Marcus, did something he had never done before. He walked directly into the meeting and placed a tablet in front of his boss. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice low but urgent, "you need to see this. Right now." David glanced down at the screen, and a vice of ice clamped around his heart. There they were, his daughters, his babies, accused of fraud in a bank, the threat of arrest hanging over them, live streaming the entire ordeal to the world. Without a word to the stunned board members, David stood, grabbed the tablet, and strode out of the room. The gears of his mind, accustomed to navigating corporate warfare, were already turning, calculating, planning. But first, he had to make a call. He pulled out his personal phone and scrolled to a number he rarely dialed directly: Robert Sterling, CEO of Madison National Bank. At that exact moment, on the back nine of the Prestwick Country Club, Robert Sterling was lining up what he hoped would be his first birdie of the day. His phone buzzed in the golf cart. He glanced at the caller ID, David Johnson, and his caddy saw the color drain from his face. For what Brigitte Hawthorne could never have known was that David Johnson wasn't just a customer of Madison National Bank. He was the customer. Johnson Technologies maintained over $50 million across various accounts: liquid assets, investments, payroll, operating capital. The fees from those accounts alone represented a significant portion of the branch's annual revenue. Sterling answered on the second ring. "David, how are you? I was just thinking about..." "Robert," David's voice was ice. "Are you watching what's happening at your Riverside branch?" "What? No, I'm golfing." "What's going on?" "Check your phone. My daughters are being accused of fraud by your bank manager, who is now calling the police on them for trying to deposit my check." Sterling's hand trembled as he fumbled with his phone. The live stream was right there on his social media feed, trending, with 10,000 viewers and climbing. He pressed play and watched in horror as his bank manager tore a check in half, as police were called on 2 13-year-old girls, as his institution's reputation crumbled in real time. "Oh my God," Sterling breathed. "David, I had no idea." This is unacceptable. I'll handle this immediately. You have 15 minutes, David said, his voice deadly calm. 15 minutes to get to that branch and fix this, or I'm pulling every single dollar and then I'm calling the media myself to tell them why. Sterling didn't wait to hear more. He threw his golf club at his caddy and sprinted for his car. His white polo shirt was already soaked with a sweat that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. He jabbed at his screen, dialing Brigitte's direct office line as he peeled out of the country club, his tires screaming in protest. The phone rang and rang and rang. Back at the bank, Brigitte's office phone was indeed ringing, but she was too consumed by her victory to notice. She was basking in what she believed was her finest moment of fraud prevention. The glass doors of the bank slid open and 2 police officers walked in. The older one, Officer Williams, had been on the force for 20 years. He thought he'd seen it all. But as he took in the scene, 2 young girls at the counter, surrounded by a sea of smartphones, he felt a jolt of recognition. He knew these girls. Officer Williams was on the board of the Riverside Youth Foundation, a charity David Johnson had founded and generously funded. Just 2 months ago, he'd been at the annual gala where Zara and Zuri had given a brilliant presentation on using technology to help underserved communities. He'd watched their father beam with pride as they spoke with the poise of adults twice their age. "Officer, thank God you're here," Brigitte said, rushing forward with relief. "These 2 attempted to cash a fraudulent check. I've detained them, but they're refusing to cooperate." Officer Williams walked slowly toward the counter, his gaze shifting from the twins to Brigitte, then to the torn pieces of the check. His partner, a younger officer named Rodriguez, hung back, sensing that something was deeply wrong. "Miss Hawthorne," Officer Williams said carefully, "can you explain to me what crime has been committed here?" "Check fraud," Brigitte stated. "That check is fake. I know it is. And have you verified that?" "I don't need to. I can tell." "You can tell," Williams repeated slowly. "Based on what evidence?" "Based on my 15 years of experience," she said, gesturing toward the twins' hoodies. "Based on the fact that these 2 came in here dressed like that, claiming their father is some CEO and expecting me to just hand over $5,000. Their father is a CEO, Williams said quietly. "David Johnson, Johnson Technologies. I know him, and I know these girls. They're honor students." The color drained from Brigitte's face, but she doubled down. "I don't care who their father is. That check is fraudulent, and I want them arrested." "For what?" Williams asked, his patience wearing thin. "For attempting to deposit a legitimate check from their own father? That's not a crime, Miss Hawthorne." "They're lying. They don't belong here." And there it was. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. The words hung in the air like a toxin. "They don't belong here." Not, "The check is fraudulent." Not, "I have evidence." Just the raw, ugly truth of her prejudice. She didn't believe these 2 black girls belonged in her bank. The phones were everywhere now. The live stream viewership had exploded past 50,000. Someone had started a hashtag, #HatBankingWhileBlack, and it was trending nationally. Brigitte seemed to finally realize that the situation was spiraling out of her control. She looked at the cameras, at Officer Williams's disapproving stare, at Jennifer Chen's horrified expression, but instead of backing down, she dug in deeper. "I want them removed from my bank," she shrieked, her professional composure gone. "I am the manager, and I am telling you they are criminals." That's when they all heard it, the sound of multiple vehicles pulling up outside. Through the bank's large windows, they saw 3 black SUVs with tinted windows come to a halt in a strategic formation. The rear door of the center vehicle opened, and a man stepped out who commanded attention the moment his foot hit the pavement. David Johnson was 6'3", with the bearing of a man who had built an empire through sheer will. His custom suit likely cost more than a month's rent for most people in the room. His presence radiated power, success, and at that moment, a barely contained fury. It was a cold fury, the kind that doesn't explode, it dismantles. 2 security personnel in dark suits exited the other vehicles. They were not for show. They were here because his daughters had texted that they needed him, and he would move heaven and earth for them. The bank fell silent as David Johnson walked through the doors. He moved with purpose, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on his daughters. For a fleeting moment, his expression softened. They were shaken, but they were safe. They were standing tall, documenting everything, just as he'd taught them. Then his eyes found Brigitte Hawthorne, and his face turned to stone. Officer Williams recognized him immediately and stepped aside. "Mr. Johnson?" "Officer," David nodded curtly. "Thank you for responding. I don't believe my daughters are the ones who've committed a crime here." He walked past the officer, past the gawking customers, past Jerome, who looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. He stopped directly in front of Brigitte Hawthorne. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the bank. "I'm David Johnson," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "And I believe you just tore up my check." Brigitte's face cycled from red to white to a sickly gray. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that instant, she realized that everything she had been so certain of was catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. And standing in the doorway, breathless from his race across town, was Robert Sterling, CEO of Madison National Bank, watching his institution implode in real time. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in Madison National Bank was absolute. David Johnson stood before Brigitte Hawthorne, and the power dynamic that had defined the last hour was utterly inverted. The woman who had wielded her authority like a weapon now looked as if she wanted the marble floor to swallow her whole. "I'm David Johnson," he repeated, his voice deliberate. "And you just tore up my check." Brigitte's face was a mask of sheer panic. Recognition crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had seen his face before, on the cover of the corporate newsletter 6 months ago, praising Madison National's most valued clients. It had lauded his business acumen, his philanthropy, his commitment to the community, and she had just accused his children of being criminals. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't—" she stammered, but her words died as the front doors burst open again. Robert Sterling practically fell into the bank, his golf shoes clicking on the marble, his face flushed with exertion. He had made the 20-minute drive in 12, breaking every speed limit, his mind racing with damage control scenarios that all ended in disaster. "David!" Sterling cried out, rushing forward. "David, I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable. I had no—" David held up a hand, stopping Sterling mid-stride without even a glance. He walked past Brigitte, straight to his daughters. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his stern expression melting into pure fatherly concern. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Did anyone hurt you? Did anyone touch you?" "We're okay, Dad," Zara said, her voice wavering now that he was here, now that she could finally let her guard down. "They treated us like criminals," Zuri added quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. David closed his eyes for a moment, visibly composing himself, caging the rage that threatened to erupt. When he opened them, he turned to face the entire bank. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying through the space, "I want you all to witness what happened here today. My daughters, 2 honor students, robotics champions, children who volunteer their time, came to this bank to deposit a legitimate check. My check, drawn on my account, an account I've held with this institution for 13 years. He paused. Instead of being treated like valued customers, they were profiled, accused, and humiliated. Why? Because a bank manager looked at 2 black girls in hoodies and decided they didn't belong here. "Mr. Johnson, please," Brigitte interjected. "It wasn't like that." David's gaze cut to her like a laser, and she fell silent. "My company, Johnson Technologies," he continued, "maintains accounts with Madison National Bank totaling approximately $50 million. A collective gasp went through the bank employees. Sterling's face, if possible, grew even paler. "David, please, let's talk about this in private. $50 million in business accounts, payroll, investment vehicles, operating capital," David said, ignoring him completely. "Madison National has been our banking partner for over a decade. We have been loyal. We have generated significant revenue for this institution." He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "I am sending an email right now to my CFO, my legal team, and my board of directors. Effective immediately, Johnson Technologies is severing all relationships with Madison National Bank. Every account will be closed. Every penny will be withdrawn. We will never do business with this institution again." "David, no." Sterling's voice cracked with desperation. "Please, we can fix this. This was one employee, one mistake." "One mistake?" David's voice rose for the first time, the controlled anger finally breaking through. A mistake is when you add numbers wrong. This wasn't a mistake, Robert. This was racism. This was my children being treated like criminals for the crime of being black in your bank. Brigitte found her voice again, desperation making her bold. Mr. Johnson, please, it was a misunderstanding. I was following security protocols. Any check over $1,000 requires verification. I was protecting the bank. Show me the protocol, David cut her off sharply. Show me the protocol that says you tear up a customer's check. Show me the protocol that says you call the police on children. Show me where in your precious protocols it says you look at two black girls and automatically assume they're criminals. Brigitte's mouth opened, then closed. There was no protocol. There was only bias. David raised his phone again. You know, my head of security received an alert when Zara started her live stream. Our system flagged a potential safety issue, so my team pulled the bank's internal security footage. They also pulled something else. He turned the screen toward Brigitte, then toward Sterling, then held it up for the room's cameras to see. These are text messages sent from Brigitte Hawthorne's phone to the security guard at 2:03 p.m. Quote, "Watch the two in hoodies. Possible trouble." End quote. My daughters had been in this bank for less than 3 minutes. They hadn't done anything but wait in line. But they were already possible trouble to you, weren't they, Ms. Hawthorne? The evidence was damning, irrefutable, and documented. Then, something remarkable happened. Jennifer Chen, the young teller who had been threatened with a write-up less than an hour ago, stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Sterling, there's something you should know. This isn't the first time. All eyes turned to her. Ms. Hawthorne has a pattern, Jennifer continued, her confidence growing with each word. I've only been here 3 weeks, but I've seen it. She watches certain customers differently. She asks for extra verification from certain people, and it's always... She hesitated, then pushed on. It's always people of color. Always. That's not true, Brigitte protested. I treat everyone the same. But Jennifer was no longer the only one speaking up. A tentative hand rose from the teller line. It belonged to an older woman named Patricia, a 7-year veteran of the bank. She told me once, Patricia said, her voice quiet but clear in the tense silence, that I needed to be extra careful during the first of the month. She said that's when the welfare checks come in and fraud attempts go up. Patricia paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. Her exact phrase was, "Those people." Next, a loan officer named Marcus stepped forward. She rejected 3 mortgage applications last month, he stated, his voice firm. All from qualified applicants. When I questioned her, because their credit and income were excellent, she just said she had a feeling about them. All 3 of those applicants were black or Latino. Then Jerome, the security guard caught in the middle of this nightmare, finally found his voice. He looked directly at David Johnson, guilt etched into every line on his face. Mr. Johnson, he began, I am so sorry for what happened to your daughters. I should have done more. But you need to know, Ms. Hawthorne has a code system. She texts me numbers. 1 means watch them closely. 2 means be ready to intervene. 3 means call the police on my signal. Over the years, I've received dozens of those texts. They were almost always about minority customers. He swallowed hard, the sound raw. I should have reported it. I know that. I'm ashamed that I didn't, but I'm saying it now. Brigitte shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with panic. They're lying. All of them. They're just trying to save themselves because they're scared. But no one was listening anymore. The evidence was a crushing weight. The pattern was undeniable, exposed in front of dozens of witnesses, multiple cameras, and a live stream that was now rocketing past 750,000 viewers. David turned to Sterling, his expression one of cold, controlled fury. So, Robert, here's my question for you. What are you going to do about the fact that your bank manager just committed the criminal destruction of a legitimate financial instrument? What are you going to do about the systemic discrimination that has apparently been happening in this branch for years? What are you going to do, he asked, his voice dropping to a steely whisper, to make this right? Sterling looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. His career, his bank's reputation, it all hung in the balance. He turned to Brigitte, and when he spoke, his voice was like flint. Brigitte Hawthorne, you are terminated, effective immediately. Security, please escort her from the premises. What? Brigitte shrieked. You can't do this. I've been with this bank for 15 years. I've won awards. I've saved this branch millions in fraud prevention. You have also exposed this company to massive legal liability, Sterling said flatly. You destroyed a customer's property. You discriminated against clients based on race. You created a hostile environment. You have violated our code of conduct, our ethical guidelines, and very likely several federal laws. Your employment is terminated. Now, 2 security guards, not Jerome, but 2 others who had arrived with Sterling, moved towards her. She looked around wildly, searching for an ally, for anyone who would defend her. But she found only a wall of silent condemnation and the cold, unblinking eyes of dozens of phone cameras. This isn't fair, she cried as they took her by the arms. I was just doing my job. I was protecting the bank. Her protests grew more desperate with each step as they escorted her toward the exit. The bank's customers and employees watched in stunned silence as 15 years of employment ended in public disgrace, broadcast live to the world. But David Johnson wasn't finished. Even with Brigitte gone, his stern expression remained fixed on Sterling. Firing her isn't enough, David said, his voice resonating through the room. This is systemic. Your own employees just testified to years of discriminatory practices. That means the culture here is broken. It means your policies, or lack thereof, allowed this to happen. It means there are probably dozens, maybe hundreds of other people who were treated this way and had no recourse. Sterling nodded frantically. You're absolutely right. I'm ordering a full, independent investigation, effective immediately. We'll hire an outside firm to audit our practices, review our training, examine every complaint. Good, David interrupted, cutting him off. And here's what else you're going to do. Johnson Technologies is establishing a $1 million fund for anyone who has experienced discrimination at this branch. We'll set up a hotline. We'll hire lawyers. If you've been profiled, rejected, or humiliated because of your race or ethnicity, we will help you. We will make sure your story is heard. Sterling looked as if he might faint, but he managed a nod. That's incredibly generous of you, David, and I want you to know, Madison National will match that fund, $2 million total for the victims. That's a start, David conceded. But money doesn't fix a culture. It doesn't change hearts. You have serious work to do, Robert. He then stepped back, for the first time since arriving, and gestured to his daughters. I think Zara and Zuri have something to say. The twins stepped forward. Zara's phone was still recording. The live stream had never stopped. The view count had just crested 1 million. Zuri spoke first, her voice calm, yet carrying an emotional weight that silenced the entire room. Mr. Sterling, do you know what it feels like to be 13 years old and be treated like a criminal? To have an adult in a position of authority look at you and decide you're a threat? To hear the police being called on you for trying to deposit your own father's check? Sterling opened his mouth, but Zuri continued, her voice unwavering. We're honor students. We're on the robotics team. We volunteer at charity events. We have never been in trouble for anything in our lives. But none of that mattered to Ms. Hawthorne. The only thing she saw was the color of our skin. Zara picked up where her sister left off. Our robotics team is supposed to leave for an international competition in Japan in 3 days. We were depositing that check to pay for our trip. We worked for months for this. We earned it. And we almost lost it all. Not because we weren't good enough, but because someone decided we didn't belong in a bank. She held up her phone. The live comments section, a cascading river of support, outrage, and shared pain. This has now been seen by over 1 million people. And the most heartbreaking part? Hundreds of them are saying the same thing has happened to them. At banks, in stores, at school, treated like criminals just for existing while black. Zuri looked directly at Sterling. So when you conduct your investigation and you write your new policies, remember us. Remember that this isn't just about 2 girls in your bank. It's about every person who has been made to feel they don't belong. Every child taught that their skin color makes them suspicious, and every parent who has to have the talk with their kids about how to survive an encounter with authority. The twins stood together, shoulders touching, their dignity a stark rebuke to the humiliation they had endured. Officer Williams, who had been standing by quietly, finally spoke up. Mr. Sterling, I'll be filing a report on what I witnessed here today. Ms. Hawthorne made false accusations, wasted police resources, and attempted to have minors arrested without cause. The district attorney may be interested in pursuing charges. Sterling nodded weakly. Of course, officer. The bank will cooperate fully. David put his arms around his daughters. Come on, girls. We're done here. As the family turned to leave, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had first tried to help, began to clap, slowly at first, then with more conviction. Jennifer Chen, the young teller, joined in. Then Marcus, then Jerome. Within seconds, the entire bank erupted in applause. Customers, employees, even the other police officer. They were applauding the twins' courage. They were applauding David's resolve. They were applauding the rare, stunning sight of justice served, instantly and publicly. David paused at the door and looked back one last time. This branch will never see another penny from my family or my company, he said, his voice clear and final. But I genuinely hope, that something good comes from this. I hope you become better. Because if you don't, this will just happen again, to someone who might not have the platform to fight back. With that, David Johnson and his daughters walked out of Madison National Bank through a crowd of supporters who had gathered outside and into their waiting cars. Inside, Robert Sterling stood in the wreckage of what had once been a respected branch. The live stream was over, but the videos were everywhere. Bank. While black was the #1 trend in the world, his phone was a vibrating brick of calls from corporate, the media, and shareholders. And in that moment, Sterling understood that firing one person was the easy part. The real work, dismantling a toxic culture, piece by piece, was just beginning. 2 days later, Robert Sterling sat in David Johnson's downtown office, a leather portfolio filled with peace offerings, new checks for the twins, scholarship funds in their names, a feature in the bank's new diversity campaign. David listened patiently, then slid the portfolio back across the vast mahogany desk, untouched. You can't buy your way out of systemic racism, Robert, he said quietly. No amount of money erases the humiliation my daughters felt. Sterling left empty-handed. That same afternoon, David made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the financial industry. Johnson Technologies was establishing its own credit union, specifically designed to serve communities historically exploited and excluded by traditional banks. He already had his first 2 hires. Jennifer Chen, the teller who had spoken up, was offered the position of branch manager. Jerome, the security guard, became the new head of security for Johnson Technologies. I failed your daughters once, Jerome told David. I will never fail anyone like that again. Meanwhile, Brigitte Hawthorne's life became a cautionary tale. Her viral infamy made her unemployable. She was the face of what happens when prejudice meets power and loses. 3 months later, the financial reports told a devastating story. Madison National's stock had plummeted 30%. The Riverside branch was hemorrhaging money. But while the bank struggled, Zara and Zuri Johnson were thriving. Their robotics team had traveled to Japan and, against competitors from 37 countries, had won first place. International champions. As they stood on that podium, medals around their necks, they represented everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The media interviews came flooding in. People always say, stay calm when you face racism, Zuri told one interviewer, but they don't tell you how hard that is. Staying calm isn't about not feeling anger or hurt. It's about not letting those feelings make you lose your power. Zara added, we documented everything. We recorded, we texted, we made sure there was evidence. Without proof, it's just your word against theirs. With proof, it's the undeniable truth. David established the Johnson Justice Foundation, dedicating $10 million to provide free legal aid for victims of discrimination. In the first month, they received over 3,000 calls, 3,000 stories that now had an army of lawyers ready to fight for them. And Mrs. Patterson, the elderly customer, became an unlikely activist. At 73 years old, she began speaking at community events. I could have stayed silent, she told audiences, but silence is complicity. 6 months to the day after the incident, Zara and Zuri walked back into the Riverside branch. They were depositing a check for $50,000, their prize money. The branch was different. New faces, new posters celebrating diversity, and a new manager behind the desk, Jennifer Chen, who greeted them with a genuine smile. "Welcome back," she said warmly. "I'm so glad you're here." The transaction took less than 5 minutes. It was professional, respectful, and unremarkable, the way it should have been from the start. One evening, David sat in his home office, reflecting. He had built a $500 million company from nothing, overcoming every obstacle society had thrown at him. But none of his success had been able to protect his daughters from being treated like criminals. That raw realization drove him to use his power for something bigger than business. The twins, now minor celebrities in the social justice space, started a mentorship program for young people who had faced discrimination. Their message, born from hard-won experience, was simple and powerful. Document everything. Your phone is your greatest tool. Stay calm. Your composure is your power. Know your worth. Their prejudice is not your reality. Speak up. Your story matters. And support each other. If you see it happening, be there, Mrs. Patterson. On the one-year anniversary, Zara and Zuri gave a TED Talk that went viral. They stood on that stage, now 14 years old, poised and powerful, telling their story not as victims, but as catalysts. Sitting in the audience, David Johnson watched his daughters and felt a profound sense of hope. A hope that this new generation, armed with courage and technology, would finally tear down the walls that his had only managed to chip away at. The story of Zara and Zuri Johnson was no longer just about justice for them. It had become a blueprint for justice for everyone.